Penguin Random House Audio presents A Deadly Education, a novel by Naomi Novik. Read for you by Anisha Dadia. For Lim, a bringer of light in dark place. Chapter 1. Soul Eater. I decided that Orion needed to die after the second time he saved my life. I hadn't really cared much about him before then, one way or another. But I had limits. It would have been all right if he'd saved my life some really extraordinary number of times, 10 or 13 or so. 13 is a number with distinction. Orion Lake, my personal bodyguard. I could have lived with that. But we'd been in the Scholomance almost 3 years by then, and he hadn't shown any previous inclination to single me out for special treatment. Selfish of me, you'll say, to be contemplating with murderous intent the hero responsible for the continued survival of a quarter of our class. Well, too bad for the losers who couldn't stay afloat without his help. We're not meant to all survive anyway. The school has to be fed somehow. But what about me, you ask? Since I'd needed him to save me. Twice even. And that's exactly why he had to go. He set off the explosion in the alchemy lab last year, fighting that chimera. I had to dig myself out of the rubble while he ran around in circles whacking at its fire-breathing tail. And that soul eater hadn't been in my room for 5 seconds before he came through the door. He must have been right on its heels, probably chasing it down the hall. The thing had only swerved in here looking to escape. But who's going to let me explain any of that? The chimera might not have stuck to me. There were more than 30 kids in the lab that day. But a dramatic rescue in my bedchamber is on another level. As far as the rest of the school is concerned, I've just fallen into the general mass of hapless warts that Orion Lake has saved in the course of his brilliant progress. And that was intolerable. Our rooms aren't very big. He was only a few steps from my desk chair, still hunched, panting over the bubbling, purplish smear of the soul eater that was now steadily oozing into the narrow cracks between the floor tiles, the better to spread all over my room. The fading incandescence on his hands was illuminating his face. Not an extraordinary face or anything. He had a big, beaky nose that would maybe be dramatic one day when the rest of his face caught up. But for now, it was just too large. And his forehead was dripping sweat and plastered with his silver-grey hair that he hadn't cut for 3 weeks too long. He spends most of his time behind an impenetrable shell of devoted admirers, so it was the closest I'd ever been to him. He straightened and wiped an arm across the sweat. "You okay? Gal, right?" he said to me, just to put some salt on the wound. We'd been in the same lab section for 3 years. "No thanks to you and your boundless fascination for every dark thing creeping through the place," I said icily. "And it is not Gal. It has never been Gal. It's Galadriel. The name wasn't my idea, don't look at me. And if that's too many syllables for you to manage all in one go, L will do." His head had jerked up, and he was blinking at me in a sort of open-mouthed way. I'm sorry?" he said, voice rising on the words, as if he didn't understand what was going on. No, I said. "I'm sorry. Clearly I'm not performing my role up to standard." I threw a melodramatic hand up against my forehead. "Orion, I was so terrified," I gasped, and flung myself onto him. He tottered a bit. We were the same height. "Thank goodness you were here to save me. I could never have managed a soul eater all on my own." And I hiccuped a pathetically fake sob against his chest. Would you believe he actually tried to put his arm around me and give my shoulder a pat? That's how automatic it was for him. I jammed my elbow into his stomach to shove him off. He made a noise like a woofing dog and staggered back to gawk at me. "I don't need your help, you insufferable lurker," I said. "Keep away from me, or you'll be sorry." I shoved him back one more step and slammed the door shut between us, clearing the end of that beaky nose by bare centimeters. I had the brief satisfaction of seeing a look of perfect confusion on his face before it vanished away, and then I was left with only the bare metal door, with the big, melted hole where the doorknob and lock used to be. Thanks, hero. I glared at it and turned back to my desk just as the blob of Salt Eater collapsed the rest of the way, hissing like a leaky steam pipe, and a truly putrescent stink filled the room. I was so angry that it took me 6 tries to get a spell for cleaning it up. After the 4th attempt, I stood up and hurled the latest crumbling ancient scroll back into the impenetrable dark on the other side of my desk and yelled furiously, "I don't want to summon an army of Skuvara. I don't want to conjure walls of mortal flame. I want my bloody room clean." What came flying out of the void in answer was a horrible tome encased in some kind of pale, crackly leather with spiked corners that scraped unpleasantly as it skidded to me across the metal of the desk. The leather had probably come off a pig, but someone had clearly wanted you to think it had been flayed from a person, which was almost as bad, and it flipped itself open to a page, with instructions for enslaving an entire mob of people to do your bidding. I suppose they would have cleaned my room if I told them to. I had to actually take out one of my mother's stupid crystals and sit down on my narrow, squeaky bed and meditate for 10 minutes, with the stench of the Salt Eater all around me and getting into my clothes and sheets and papers. You'd think that any smell would clear out quickly, since one whole wall of the room is open to the scenic view of a mystical void of darkness. So delightfully like living in a spaceship aimed directly into a black hole. But you'd be wrong. After I finally managed to walk myself back from the incoherent kicking levels of anger, I pushed the pigskin book off the far edge of my desk back into the void, using a pen to touch it, just in case, and said as calmly as I could manage, "I want a simple household spell for cleaning away an unwanted mess with a bad smell." Sullenly, down came thump, a gigantic volume titled Amunan Hamwerod, packed completely full of spells written in Old English, my weakest dead language, and it didn't open to any particular page either. That sort of thing is always happening to me. Some sorcerers get an affinity for weather magic, or transformation spells, or fantastic combat magics like Dear Orion. I got an affinity for mass destruction. It's all my mum's fault, of course, just like my stupid name. She's one of those flowers and beads and crystals sorts, dancing to the goddess under the moon. Everyone's a lovely person, and anyone who does anything wrong is misunderstood or unhappy. She even does massage therapy for mundanes because it's so relaxing to make people feel better, love. Most wizards don't bother with mundane work. It's considered a bit low, or if they do, they hunt themselves out an empty sack of a job. The person who retires from the firm after 46 years and no one quite remembers what they were doing. The befuddled librarian that you occasionally glimpse wandering the stacks without seeming to do anything. The third vice president of marketing who shows up only for meetings with senior management. That sort of thing. There are spells to find those jobs, or coax them into existence. And then you've provided yourself with the necessities of life and kept your time free to build mana and make your cheap flat into a 12-room mansion on the inside. But not Mum. She charges almost nothing, and that little, mostly because if you offer to do professional massage for free, people will look at you sideways. As well they should. Naturally, I came out designed to be the exact opposite of this paragon, as anyone with a basic understanding of the balancing principle might have expected. And when I want to straighten my room, I get instructions on how to kill it with fire. Not that I can actually use any of these delightful cataclysmic spells the school is so eager to hand out to me. Funnily enough, you can't actually whip up an entire army of demons on just a wink. It takes power, and lots of it. And no one is going to help you build mana to summon a personal demon army. So let's be real. It takes Malia. Everyone, almost everyone, uses a bit of Malia here and there, Stuff they don't.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?